But I think there are buyers now involved in a transaction or a process. They're probably starting to realize that if I had a buyer's agent by my side, the probability of me getting a better result is going to be much better, much superior.
That's Ben Handler, one of our guests on this week's show. Big welcome to the show as well. Ben is a buyer's agent, and Ben decided some years ago to share his vast knowledge and train those wanting to become a buyer's agent, just how they can get started and how they can build a profitable business. Well, since then, he's trained over 4,000 agents, and in so doing, he's created an enormous shift in how buyers now find and secure a property to call home or as an investment. We learn more about how buying property has become so much easier, faster, and more efficient. Also today, Bushy catches up with Mark McDuffie to find out how he's giving baby boomers a helping hand as record numbers of them are downsizing. But just before we start, I want to thank our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apiro Marketing. Don't forget too, you'll find us on all podcast players as The Property Hub. Also, we're on the Southern Cross Austereo Network, on Hot Copper, and on all social media platforms.
Property deductions can save you thousands of dollars each year. To make sure you maximise deductions, you need to work with the most experienced quantity surveyor in the country. BMT Tax Depreciation is the leading specialist in the industry. They've completed over 700,000 tax deduction schedules for residential investment and commercial properties Australia-wide. BMT guarantee to find double your fee in the first full financial year deductions. Call BMT on 1300 728 726 today for an obligation-free quote.
Realty Talk exclusive to The Property Hub.
We're witnessing a surge of growth in the numbers of buyer's agents, and we're seeing evidence of a tangible influence that they're having on the buying and selling process. The important role of a buyer's agent, that is representing the buyer in a real estate transaction, is now no longer being debated. Good representation on behalf of the buyer is long overdue. It's unreasonable and quite frankly it's ridiculous to hold on to the theory that an agent representing the seller can also act in the best interest of the buyer. So with that comes a recognition of the enormous and valuable assistance that a good buyer agent can bring to a transaction. And that is not just for the buyer, but also for the listing agent. Ben Handler, himself a buyer's agent, saw the growing demand for better representation for buyers in what could be the biggest purchase that they'll ever make. So he set about educating those wanting to become buyer's agents about how to get started, how they can build a successful business from the ground up, or qualify to join an established team. And Ben joins us now to explain more. Ben, firstly, how many people have come through the academy, and is the demand for its service increasing?
So Buyers Agent Institute was launched 2018. Where we are today, there's about 4,050 in the group. Not all are active operational buyers agents. In terms of demand and where it's going, I mean, it's just increasing year on year. So the surge for buyers agents, that trajectory is just going straight north.
I'm going to tap in and ask you some reasons for that. But before I do, could you just lay out for us the difference between a buyer's agent and what we've known as a traditional, or what they're now being called listing agents? What's the difference, Ben?
The key difference is, as a buyer's agent, you are engaged specifically by the buyer, in most instances exclusively by the buyer. You're being remunerated by the buyer. So obviously, like a selling agent's representing a seller, they are getting remunerated by the seller. They're representing the seller's best interest. The buyer's agent's effectively just doing that on the buy side. We're also, representing them for auction bidding in isolation if required. We do negotiation only if required. But typically most buyer's agents are operating on a full service, which is start to finish. Mr. or Mrs. Buyer wants to buy investment or own a rock or whatever it is, and the buyer's agent fulfill the entire journey.
Those differences you've set out for us there would require a different level of training, or is the training for traditional agents pretty much the same as buyer agents? What are the differences?
I would say it's typically much of a muchness. For example, so if you're a buyer's agent, though, focusing on investor clients as your core offering, a real estate agent, in what they know at the moment in terms of what they do, most likely they won't be up to speed with how to deal with that, because there's research involved that is beyond, core logic or price finder. You've got to look elsewhere and understand. And in terms of developing a portfolio strategically for your clients, it requires a different level of thinking and skill set as well. But if you're doing owner-occ as a buyer's agent, I think real estate agents can transition into that very, very easily.
Yeah, I touched on it in the introduction, and that is that there's been an incredible increase in the number of buyer's agents. And when we look back on it, I mean, I've been an active agent predominantly listing since 1988. So it's a fairly long time. And I must admit, I have struggled from time to time trying to understand how I could represent properly a buyer and a seller at the same time when you're trying to sit in the middle of the negotiations. Long-winded way to ask you the question about, what's caused this increase. Is it as simple as wanting better representation by buyers?
I think there's a few reasons. One is, I think I've definitely driven the increase since I started the Institute in 2018. Like, if you look at the number of buyer's agents in 2018 versus now, it's dramatically shifted. So I think that I've put a very focused, conscious effort into growing the industry. And so I think that's been one factor. I think another factor for me that I observed was COVID. So I've been in the industry as a buyer's agent since 2009, right? And it wasn't until 2020 that I, for me, started to really see a massive shift in consumer awareness for buyer's agents in Australia. And that's because if you're in Victoria during COVID and you wanted to buy in a different part of Victoria or interstate, you couldn't get there. So you had to, in most cases, go to a buyer's agent. So I think COVID was or has been pivotal to an increase of awareness, and also just buyer's agents in general increasing. Also, I think we're at a time where it's very difficult to buy property at the moment, right? Even though rates have, skyrocketed 13 times over the last 2 years, it's very, very difficult for the average buyer to buy. And so I think due to that frustration, right, and lack of stock, they're like, hey, it's time to outsource. Let's get the professional in. So I think those three factors have been pivotal. I
want to ask you a question too about off-market. We're hearing a lot of that term, off-market and so on. And I'd really be keen to get your view on this. The role of the buyer's agent has largely been built on the thought that a buyer's agent will get access to a lot of off-market stock. What are you seeing amongst your members? Are they focused purely on that, or are they providing a good service for owner-occupiers as well?
It's an interesting question. So I'll rewind back a bit. So when I was at Cohen Handler as a buyer's agent, I used to get a lot of people, potential customers, coming to see me saying, hey, I want off-market. And after about 3 years of hearing that at the early stage of my career, I was like, why do they want off-market? Like, and then I started to realize and peel back that their actual real problem was they couldn't buy what's on the market, which is why they wanted off the market. They couldn't get a deal done on the markets, they wanted off. And so to answer your question, off the market, in a lot of cases, like I'm looking to buy a property myself, and both properties that I've liked that were off market fell through. The vendor wasn't motivated, the vendor decided not to sell. So off market, and they were both overpriced. So off market doesn't always represent the best option to get a deal done. And so a lot of buyer's agents, they are not only providing access to off-market, but pre-market, post-market, on-market. I personally think the true value of a buyer's agent is buying what's on the market. When there's a property that's available to the public and everyone can have a go, if the buyer's agent has a very strong strategic relationship with that real estate agent, I think that's where their true value starts to really flower. But there are still some very good off-market opportunities. There's some very good pre-market opportunities. But I think as a buyer's agent, you need to bring them all together and explore all the channels, and then the best property will win in whatever channel it sits in.
Yeah, very, very good advice there. And I do think too, there's a misunderstanding about the term off-market. There is no such thing really. I mean, if it's listed with an agent, it's technically on the market. It really means that it's just not on a portal. So yeah, I tend to think it should be called pre-portal. And that's one of the advantages. Our major sponsor, of course, is Realty Marketplace. And that's one of the advantages there, where agents are now putting it onto the marketplace prior to putting it onto one of the portals, which is giving buyers agents access to stock that, you know, a buyer might not necessarily be able to see until it does actually become listed.
I mean, I tend to agree with you, right? Like if it's with an agent, it's been, you know, there's been an agency agreement signed between, you know, real estate agent and vendor. You're right. It's technically on the market. It's not just on realestate.com or a portal. You're right. I think that there's a bit of a misconception around, you know, just off markets being the solution to buy property. Like I'm looking to buy myself, and the off market properties that I've seen have been the most challenging for me in terms of I've liked them, but they've been the hardest to buy, right? And so I think you do have to question, why is it off market? I think you have to ask questions like, why isn't it on? And maybe the vendor doesn't want to pay advertising. Maybe the vendor doesn't want to open up the property and disrupt a tenant. I mean, there could be a number of reasons as to why, but I think what's most important is asking the hard questions to begin with as to why this property is not marketed online and going through a campaign.
In your opinion, I mean, buyer's agents are becoming more and more the norm nowadays. The impact of the buyer's agent on the process of buying and selling real estate, or particularly buying, is that changing? What sort of impact is that having on the buying process, where people are buying, how educated they are when they buy, and even on prices? Do you see it having any kind of impact?
Absolutely. I mean, going back to your earlier question regarding the surge of buyer's aids and the demand, I think as an average buyer, if you're trying to buy something, typically, I mean, Morgan Stanley did a report recently for the REA Group where they estimated last year around 3 to 5% of transactions were done with with a buyer's agent, which is very small. Okay, so it's very small, and that's an estimate as well. But I think there are buyers now involved in a transaction or a process, and there's a buyer's agent involved as well as, you know, competition to them. And then they're probably starting to realize that, hey, like maybe if I had a buyer's agent by my side, the probability of me getting a better result or getting access to a different property or just getting a better outcome in general is going to be much better, much superior. So I think a lot of buyers now, they're becoming a lot more educated on the importance of having expert, independent representation. Just like you would get a mortgage broker, an accountant, you'd engage a lawyer, you'd engage a real estate agent if you're looking to sell. I think the awareness and the education to the buyer through just, I guess, better consumer awareness in the media around the benefits of a buyer's agent, I think is getting the average buyer to think a bit differently around representation.
Can you just give me an idea as to what are you seeing as the challenges that are facing buyer's agents now as they're coming into the marketplace?
There's one key challenge that I've been hearing about a lot lately, and I'm seeing a lot, is stock, because it's so competitive out there. I mean, I'm talking quite general because there's some markets which aren't and there's some areas which aren't, but I'm talking like Southeast Queensland, South Australia, WA, typically investor focused, but also a bit of owner-occ in blue chip areas. It's very difficult to buy. And so I think a challenge for buyer's agents as the industry grows is actually around the volume of transactions they'll be able to do within a month or a quarter or a financial year, because it's becoming very hard to buy property. That's a big challenge. And going back to some earlier questions around the need to use a buyer's agent, you can only imagine the average buyer who's trying to, could be their first time buying a property, or They could be quite inexperienced. Like, that's what they're up against. And it's very difficult.
Congratulations on what you're doing with BAI. It certainly is inspirational. We want to see it continue to grow. And, you know, we're dedicating more and more time in this show to how that's happening. So we'd love to have you back in the future at some stage as our guest. And thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Successful property investment is a game of finance. Do you have the right team and the right game plan? Realty Talk is brought to you by Know How Property. More than mortgage brokers, Bushy Martin and his team of investment architects set you up with a sustainable strategy structured to lower your costs, tax, risk and stress while increasing your capacity for growth. Know How has helped over 1,900 homeowners and investors secure more than $800 million in property wealth. So get set to live more, work less, and live your legacy. Want to know how to invest in your freedom? Visit knowhowproperty.com.au.
This is Realty Talk, powered by realty.com.au.
Now, with baby boomers now making up about 25% of our population to the tune of over 6 million of us, and roughly a quarter of those looking to right-size their home in the near future to free up equity and lifestyle, given that many are asset-rich and cash-poor, but are handcuffed and housebound because they just can't free up the deposit to make the change, industry disruptor and problem solver Downsizer.com has developed a unique solution to fix this, which they released a couple of years ago. And the MD and co-founder, Mark McDuffie, joins us again to give us a bit of an update on how things are tracking. So welcome back to Realty Talk, Mark.
Thanks, Bushy. Always appreciate our conversations. Thanks.
Likewise, because I love what you're doing in this space, and there's a big and growing need. But I guess just to kick things off, Mark, for those who haven't had a chance to see your previous appearances here on the show, can you start by giving us a bit of a quick refresher on the problems that right sizes are facing and what Downsizer does to help solve those?
Yeah, thank you, Bushy. So we're Downsizer.com, as Bushy says, we've been in the market now for about 2 years. The first 12 months of that was really discreetly in pilot mode, ironing out some kinks with property developers in 3 states originally. Now, Downsizer solves a problem on 2 sides of the marketplace. We are working with property developers and vendors on one side of the marketplace who, you know, increasingly building stock that in an environment where there's less buyers and less mortgages approved in the market because of interest rates, they're doing it tough. So property developers on one side trying to sell. And on the other side, you've got this, as you alluded to, this cohort of Australians and actually global citizens, the baby boomer generation is a macroeconomic trend. They're expressing the pain points in a different way. Up and down the country, they're walking into property open houses or sales suites and saying, I really love the property, but we have to sell our current home first because we don't have the 5 or 10% cash deposit to exchange. The Downsizer really sits at the intersection of those 2 forces.
Yep. So talk us about how that works, because people are going to be saying now, okay, well, I've sort of got a head around this, but how are you breaking that nexus and facilitating so they're able to secure the next home before they sell the home?
Yeah, so we have we've kind of have 2 big two big innovations. We've got the technology side of the innovation, which is we can prove who Bushy is, his net equity, the house that he owns, any outstanding debts. I can say, with Bushy's permission, of course, how much Bushy has in net equity. Now, Bushy may have a £4 million house that he or she wholly owns. That means he's got $4 million of equity. Bushy wants to simplify his life and he wants to buy a $2 million apartment off the plan at this really sensational development with beach views and simple lock-up facilities, amenities, all that kind of stuff. Bushy wants to simplify his life for whatever reason. So the digital technology allows us to qualify all of Bushy's personal information and his net equity, but we present that to the property developer or the vendor to say, Bushy's good for it. Bushy doesn't need to pay a 10% cash deposit. So if Bushy was buying a $2 million property, he or she would have to find a $200,000 cash deposit to exchange.
Yep.
What we do is we have this unique financial instrument that allows Bushy to exchange and stay in his current $4 million property, allow capital growth whilst the new one's being built,
Yep.
And then he can exchange, and he or she needs to pay the full asking price at settlement. So basically, we've got two sides of the product. There's an insurance instrument that's issued, or a bond instrument that's issued by our underwriter.
Yep.
Yeah, that protects the developer or the vendor in the event that Bushy walks away.
Yep.
The cost of that is a fraction of, because it's not a lending product, it's an insurance type instrument.
Yes.
The cost is therefore a fraction of what it would cost Bushy as a bridging finance to complete. So we issue a downsizer bond that allows Bushy to exchange on his $2 million property, and he can stay in his current property until the new one's ready. The only issue that Bushy has, if he doesn't complete, there is a claim, but that's the unhappy path. What we're seeing is Bushy's made a lifestyle decision. He or she wants to simplify their lives, and they're simplifying by selling their $4 million property, buying a $2 million, and they've got $2 million in net equity that will transform their lives.
Yeah, no, it's really an unlocking key that you brought to the table that's releasing the handcuffs of those that are stuck in that position where they can't move the property, or it's too hard or too expensive, or even not possible for some to actually get bridging finance in the current climate, given that lending requirements have tightened up a fair bit in recent times. So it's a real access key in that perspective. Since we last spoke, we went through it in a bit of detail a couple of years ago. What's new and improved since we had those initial chats, Mark?
New and improved, a lot happens in a year in startup, so I'll try and summarize as much as I can. I think it's just over a year since we spoke. So key changes for us would be market adoption has really taken hold. So we now have more than 3,000 properties for sale on our platform. And the value of those properties for sale is now more than $3.4 billion of stock. So we have more stock for downsizers to come to our platform and search for where they want to live. We've got great properties now in Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Queensland, Southeast Queensland, Gold Coast, Canberra. We're all over the place now. So number one is we have more choice and more stock available to suit your needs.
Yeah.
We also do existing properties now. We've had the first two sales of existing properties, so it doesn't have to be only off the plan, which is a real step change.
Yes.
The other thing that is significant, but not everybody really appreciates the barrier that was there. We had an underwriting rating that wasn't on par with the market leader QBE.
Yep.
We are now the same rated, so we are Standard & Poor's A+ rated, which means that it's opened up all of the institutional players. So now we have sold properties in conjunction with all the big players. We have Mirvac signed with us, Sekisui House have signed with us. We've sold with Colliers, we've sold with Cbus. The real game changer there is investment grade, which builds trust for both the property developer, the real estate agent, and the purchaser, and the conveyancers in the middle. So we've really lifted the game from we're acting like enterprise. We like to say we're enterprise from leadership down to the first line of code. So we're all operating like we are an institutional player. Most of our staff have come from large institutions, so that's just out of the box for us. Yeah, so if I summarize, the biggest thing for us is we're investment grade, A+, so the adoption becomes quicker.
Yep.
As a result of that, we have much more stock right across the country, and we now do existing properties as well.
Yeah,
let's dive
into that existing piece for a minute, because in terms of the potential scope and the opportunity that could ripple out of the existing space, given that there's still some challenges for some in the construction industry, it's not easy at the moment, and I'm sure what you bring to the table is actually facilitating developers in terms of pre-sales, which is helping their own funding to shore up the follow through on the developments. But certainly there's a fair bit of nerves in the waves at the moment for anything off the plan or new build. That sort of opening the door into the existing space. Can you talk a little bit more about that and where that's heading? Yeah,
well, as a proportion of the market, existing sales in Australia make up, I would say it's probably about 65% of residential sales, maybe even more than that, given the resistance to off the plan that you mentioned. So it's a huge market for us, but really the way that we're operating is the bond is exactly the same.
Yep.
We still qualify that Bushy has enough net equity, but really where we're seeing that existing property bond use is, let's say you've got an auction. Bushy, sorry, I don't know where you live, Bushy, but I'll make it up, right? So Bushy lives in the eastern suburbs of Sydney.
Yeah.
Bushy's lived in his house in Randwick for 25 years. His kids and his grandkids have moved on. He's rattling around and he wants to make a move. Now, there's not a lot of new builds, or Bushy might not trust new builds. Then he sees an apartment or a house around the corner. He knows the apartment. He knows the building because he's walked past it for a coffee to his, he walks past his favorite barista every day and he goes, if I would like to move, but I can't find the right stock. Oh, look, something's appeared at auction round the corner. It's going to auction in 8 weeks.
Yep.
There's no way Bushy's going to be able to sell his house within 8 weeks. Bushy doesn't have the deposit to exchange.
Yep.
So what we do is work with agents selling that property at auction, and we can pre-qualify Bushy. So we take him through the process and we say, hey, Bushy, you can bid at auction up to a certain price. So we use the same numbers as we did before.
Yep.
Bushy's got a $4 million net equity house in Randwick. Bushy wants to buy a $2 million smaller place in the same suburb. He doesn't have $200,000 deposit and he hasn't sold his current house first.
Yep.
We pre-qualify Bushy to bid up to the amount that he wants to. So if he's got $4 million in net equity, he can actually bid up to $4 million, but Bushy might not want to do that.
No.
So Bushy can take his pre-approval to the auction and say to the agent, provided the vendor's willing to accept a slightly delayed settlement, because Bushy still has to sell his current house to settle on the end. So we do a short-term bond, 3 to 6 months, provided the vendor is willing to accept delayed settlement for a better price. Now, what that means is if you're a good agent and you're trying to drive people to an auction, instead of 3 cash buyers bidding, you might have 3 cash buyers plus 4 pre-approved downsizer bonds. You've now got 7 people bidding for the same property. The vendor's going to get a better outcome.
100%. That's pretty exciting, where I think that will go to once the awareness and the opportunity, both from the professionals and the general property audience, get their head around that. That's a massive game changer, I think, potentially, Mark.
That's it. It replaces the need for bridging finance, right? And our underwriters' deposit power, and they've been in market for 30 years, and 98% of their business is short-term bonds. And they are either existing properties at auction or bridging finance or whatever the need might be. Or Bushy might have a term deposit that's maturing in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. So he doesn't have the cash, but he's got proven funds.
Yep.
So you can use these bonds to bid at auction or exchange without the need for a cash exchange. It's a phenomenal product in this market where you talk about bridging finance earlier on. Since the Royal Commission, it's very hard to get bridging funding if you don't have an income. It's almost like it's irresponsible lending, right?
Yeah, almost impossible, actually. In that context, real game changer there. I know when we spoke last time, you had some almost global expansion plans. I know there's been a bit of work happening in that area, but particularly in the UK. Can you share how that's progressing and what will be the trickle-back impact on what you're doing locally as a result? Yeah,
I mean, if I take it a little step back, our business, the genesis of our business was, a property developer co-founder that's reflected that for every property he sold, he could sell 2 or 3 more if we could remove the need for a cash deposit. Within 3 to 6 months, we quickly found through customer-centered design this downsizer or baby boomer sector in Australia. There's 1.9 million Aussies, 55 and above, planning on downsizing. Yeah. That is not limited to the island of Australia.
No.
Right. So there's 1.9 million in Australia. There's 7.2 million in the UK that are 55 and above. And of that cohort in the UK, 7.2 million, and their average stored equity is 98% in that cohort. There's trillions of pounds of equity in the UK, and the macroeconomics are almost identical. Developers are doing it tough, builders are doing it tough, economy's tough, mortgage rates are up, so there's less approved mortgages in the market. The downsizers have the key to the property problem. In Australia, there's 13 million spare beds empty every night.
Yeah.
And they are controlled by the baby boomer segment. And on the other end of the market, you've got those trying to get onto the market that are locked out. We don't have a housing crisis. We've got like a supply problem and a transition problem.
That's
and the UK is
exactly.
the same. So where we're quickly, and the US, we've identified the top 10 states that we would do in the US. And again, the macroeconomics don't lie. 24 million homeowners in the top 10 states that we would look at in the US are 60 plus and wholly own their house. So this macroeconomic trend of unlocking equity by using a bond to replace a cash deposit is going to work over time. And yes, the adoption has been slower in Australia than we'd like, but we're now there. We've sold $65 million of property in Australia.
Yeah,
that's not bad for a little startup.
That's
in the UK, we're if we were a small agent setting up on a corner of a street or high street, we'd be pretty happy. We'd be high-fiving and slapping each other's backs. But startup worlds expect billion-dollar revenues in 10 minutes. That doesn't happen. But we're slowly chipping away. We're doing better than most. But the UK really excites me because the adoption there so far has been phenomenal compared to Australia. The speed where they're accepting the concept and the principle, and we're very close to signing with one of the biggest real estate agents chains, national real estate agent in the UK. The stock list that we have lined up in the UK for launch later this year is £3.5 billion, 7 million Aussie. To put that into context, we've been in business for 2 years in Australia, and we've only got half that. Our pilot will be that size in the UK.
Yeah, amazing. Because I'm thinking here as you're talking, Mark, and there's so much discussion in all levels of media and from politicians and policymakers about the housing affordability crisis. But if you drill down on that, the listing levels at the moment, I keep a close eye on this, Mark, and depending on where you are, the number of properties for sale are down anywhere between 25 to 40%. Now, a lot of that is because people are homebound. They want to make a move, but they don't have the ability to do so. Now, if a smart politician and a policymaker from a level of government recognise the ability to use the downsizer approach to free up equity so that it's going to spill over into the economy, it's also going to create a chain reaction that's going to, because we've got an accessibility problem here that frees up that exercise, and the roll-on effects are actually massive. So I think there's a real opportunity for anyone listening in. If you're in government or you've got an impact on policy, you need to reach out to Mark and the Downsizer team, because there's a big opportunity here to free up those blocked doors that currently sit there because it's just impossible to make the move.
I completely agree, right? I mean, I think there's no one solution or silver bullet to the property equation here in Australia or the UK. We very much see ourselves as being part of that, because we can see this long-held stock that isn't being freed up because the downsizers either have a financial block or they can't find property that suits them. But I really genuinely believe there's a combination of solutions that can help, the government's target for more stock, but also releasing this long-held stock. And the 13 million spare bedrooms a night just blows my mind in Australia. It's so sad.
Yeah, no, it's something that could be fairly simply solved if we thought outside of the box and stopped following the old traditional models. And it's the old, definition of insanity. You keep on trying to do the same thing and wonder why you don't get a different result. Well, these are the sort of initiatives that we need to be leaping on. Look, this is really exciting, Mark. I was excited last time I spoke to you. I'm just as excited now, because I think the opportunity is actually bigger now than what we were initially talking. We were only talking about off the plan before. That there's now the burgeoning existing opportunity for people to take advantage of. For those that are listening in and can see the same potential here, how can downsizers and developers that might be listening, and real estate agents as well, for that matter, who can see this as a way to free up potential sales for them that might be sitting there that can't do anything at the moment, how can they find out more and whether downsizer.com is right for them, Mark?
You can go on the website and register for information, and that will end up in hello@downsizer.com. But I'm always keen to speak to everybody. So my name is Mark McDuffie. You can hit me at mark@downsizer.com. You can hit me on LinkedIn. We'd love to speak to downsizers, policymakers, real estate agents, property developers, anyone that wants to try and unlock this 1.9 million homeowners that are moving, whether we exist or not. It will happen. We're just here to help it along the way. So yeah, hit us up on either the website, hit me up on LinkedIn, drop us an email. There's information on the website there as well. So there's many different ways to get me, and I've always made myself available. So just hit me up.
Yeah, no, and I'll be encouraging everyone to do that because the more the word gets out about the solution that you bring to the table, the better everyone's going to be. So look, I just want to thank you for bringing us up to speed with this really great solution opportunity. And again, thanks for joining us here on the show today, Mark.
Thank you so much, Bushy. Take care.
Are you curious about harnessing your super for property investment? Propel your future with the enlightening online seminar, The Ultimate Masterclass to Self-Managed Super Fund Property Mastery. Reserve your spot now at getrare.com.au/SMSF. Spearheaded by Rusty from independent buyers agency Get Rare Properties, this masterclass unravels strategic property investment using your self-managed superannuation fund. You know, it's not just about learning. It's about transforming your financial future through education. So embrace this opportunity to enrich your investing acumen. Enroll now in the free masterclass and begin a journey that marries insight with action, leading to a financially empowered tomorrow.
Unlock bonus content now as a premium subscriber.
Join us for more property news each week with Realty Talk, and get invested by subscribing to the Property Hub on all podcast players. Join the conversation too anytime on Facebook. Just search for the Property Hub Collective and make sure you give us a like and a follow. Thanks to our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apiro Marketing. Until next week, all the best.